let's move on to the section on. I want to talk a little bit about Advaita Vedanta now, since I said that's what the topic is about. And oops. I did something wrong. Yes. So Advaita Vedanta comes from two words. The first word is Advaita. Dva means two. If you go to Russian, dva means two. Du in French, duo, dos, right? These are all cognates. Sanskrit comes from something called Proto-Indo-European. All the European and Indian languages have a common root, and Sanskrit is the mother of all the Indian languages. So that is why you see these cognates. Dva is two. Dvaita means two-ness, dualism, right? A is a negating prefix. Advaita, non-dualism. No two, only one. Right? Very simple. So, but we now have to know what the two is, right? Advaita. Then the second part is Vedanta. So Vedanta is composed of two words, Veda plus Anta. Anta means the end. So Vedanta means the end of the Veda. So we need to know what the Veda is before we understand what Advaita Vedanta is talking about. Now the Veda is many things to many people, but I will give you a very limited definition. If it doesn't agree with yours, we can talk later. In the spiritual context, Veda is actually the mystical revelations that the great sages called rishis had in India in about, the dates vary about, from 5000 to 6000 BC if you believe some people, as late as 1400 BC if you believe some other people. I don't have an opinion on it one way or the other. The point is they're very old. Okay. So, and yoga is at least as old as these mystical revelations, because those mystical revelations were had in samadhi. The rishis were in samadhi when they had these mystical revelations. Okay. Now, of the Veda, there is something called Samhita, which are the early compilations, and there are four Vedas. The early compilations were in four. First one is called Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva. Okay. Now, the early Vedas were composed as hymns. Okay. So I'll start the first. The Rig Veda starts Agnimile Purohitam Yagyasya Devam Ritvajam Hotaharam. I connect to 6000 years back there, right there. What does it say? Agni, the Lord of fire. Okay. I praise thee. Okay. You are the priest. Okay. You are the God, the deity of the sacrifice, of the ritual. Yagyasya Devam. Okay. And you are the one who gives great treasures. Ratnadhatam. Okay. So now you can interpret this in two ways. One is a ritual aspect, which is what comes with the Brahmana. Okay. There's another part, prose sections of the Veda called Brahmanas. They gave extensive, detailed description. Put the sacrificial altar like this. Put the fire like this. Pour the ghee like this. Okay. And these were not, to us, they may seem to be not so useful, but actually this is a very good. You will understand the purpose of ritual in a bit. Okay. But everything that you read in India, don't take it for face value. There is nothing literal in ancient Indian philosophy. Everything always has a subtle meaning. Okay? So keep an open mind. There's a subtle meaning to this Agni. Agni resides in your solar plexus. Why is it called solar plexus? Solar is the sun. Agni and the sun are very similar. There is a psychoenergetic center, a chakra, in your solar plexus. When you offer the lower energies as an oblation into this, what results takes you to treasure, the wisdom. Okay? It is not that they just wrote this out of fun, that they were poets and they just wrote this, and then some people started doing the rituals and then later philosophy came. They had the insight right there. But naturally, when you have an insight in a non-dual space, what will you describe? How will you describe that insight? The moment you emerge from that, you will look around you. You see the sun, the moon, the stars, a granary, a cow. So you're going to write your poetry in things that you can describe. It is not a primitivist poetry. This is a very big mistake that people do. Native American culture also has very similar things. People first thought it's primitive, but no, then they realized they actually know how to live. They did not destroy the land, right? They had no concept of property. Okay, these are deep spiritual insights. They don't come from just some sort of a, social context. They're spiritual insights, and I think that, I don't know the Native American tradition, I'm extrapolating that, but in the Indian tradition I can tell you that those have two meanings. One is an external meaning, one is the internal meaning. The external meaning is what you see in the rituals called the Brahmana, and those were prose passages. Why the external meaning? Why the ritual? So for this you have to understand that in the Vedic view of human life, the ideal span of a human's life was 100 years. Jiji Vishet Shatam Shamaha. May we live to be 100 years is always the feeling. Now these 100 years were divided into 4 stages. They were called ashramas or stages. The first stage is brahmacharya, and in this stage, child birth to about 25, child grows up, learns some of the Veda, maybe a trade. This is the time when you're learning things. After 20, this is spring. So let me give you an analogy. 4 seasons, 4 human seasons. Spring is the time of growth. Right? Then you come to summer. Summer is the glorious time. Right? Everything is bright and there is energy. 25 to 50. That was called grihastha. Grihastha means one who lives in a household, a householder. Okay? So a grihasthi would then perform rituals to sustain society. So by performing these rituals, they were keeping the flow of life, external life. External life does not stop. You may meditate, but life has to go on. People have to eat. People have to carry on the functions of society. So ritual was prescribed so that you would go through the second stage in a sensible way, keeping in mind that my true purpose will change when I go to the next stage. So at about 50, the children would have grown up, empty nest syndrome would have gone off, and remember in those days they possibly married earlier. So 50 to 75 is autumn. Okay? That stage is called Vanaprastha. Vana means forest. Prastha means departure, departing to the forest. Okay? So at that stage in life, once the children have been settled, the couple would retire away from the settlement to the forest dwellings. Okay? And in those forest dwellings dwelt these sages who had these visions. Okay? So they would then take initiation and wisdom from the sages, and that is what this Upanishad is about. Upanishad is the philosophical pinnacle that has been distilled from those hymns in the Rig Veda and other Vedas. And so by going and sitting next to Upanishad, go and sit next to the teacher and then find out what is this wisdom that we were doing in rituals. What did it all mean? What is the purpose of my life? That's an important question. Right? So that stage, Vanaprastha, and then finally the last stage, 75 to 100, was sannyasa, complete renunciation, in which case you abjure all connection to your name, to your family, to everything. Okay? And then you are only committed to fulfilling your purpose of life, which is to know this consciousness. So that's the reason why the Vedas are like this. It's not that they just for any arbitrary reason. There's always a purpose when you look closely at these things. So that's fine. So now how does Vedanta stand in the midst of all this? This is all very old, right? Long time ago. As I said, at least 1400 BC. Then later came many people who wanted to explain this summary, right? The Samhita Brahmana Upanishad from the Vedas. And those are called darshanas. Okay? Now darshana is again a very dangerous word. Okay? Often it is mistranslated as philosophy. It's not philosophy. Darshana comes from the word drish. Drish means to see. Okay? In Sanskrit it's translated as drishyate anena iti darshana. That by which I see, that is darshana. Okay? So a darshana is a revelation. It's not a dry philosophy that you can dissect in a cafe or that you can study in a philosophical classroom. You have to experience it. It's fundamentally a practical approach. Okay? You cannot say abstractly without practicing that, oh, this is correct and that is correct, dualism. You may have some intuitive feeling that, okay, I like the non-dualism idea, that's fine. But you have to experience it before you can. So people who sit and dissect at length, reading book after book, I don't think that is going to give you darshana. Right? So there are 6 darshanas. And in fact, yoga is one of those darshanas. Yoga is not exercise. Yoga is a revelation. There is Sankhya, we talked about that. Mimamsa deals with the rituals, Nyaya and Vaisheshika, logic, and that is an atomistic philosophy. Vedanta comes here. So it was a very rich tradition. In fact, I'm only telling you the ones that accept the authority of the Veda. There were 4 others that don't accept the authority of Veda, and nobody killed them in India. There is in fact one very nice school called Charvaka school, which is a materialist school. They said, body is everything, the guy with the most toys wins. Okay. And you know, right? Yeah. So it's okay. You don't have to fight with them. That's all right. No problem. So now from this Vedanta, there were many schools of Vedanta also. Let me not mislead you that Advaita is the only one. It's the one that I know. There are many schools, 6 schools of Vedanta also. There's a lot of diversity in thought at the time. And so Advaita Vedanta derives one of its starting sources is the Upanishad. What I'm trying to tell you is that it comes all the way from the Veda. There are 2 other sources that it derives from. One is the Bhagavad Gita, and the other is something called the Brahma Sutra. Bhagavad Gita, you might have heard of something called the Mahabharata. It's an epic of India. So it's a much later work than the Veda. In the middle of that is a long poem which contains, I would say, the philosophical essence of all that we think of as Indian philosophy. It has yoga in it, it has bhakti in it, devotion, it has how to act, karma yoga in it. That is the Bhagavad Gita. So that is also a starting point. So what Vedanta is, it starts off as an exegesis, starting from these source texts, and trying to explain through the spiritual insights that those people had in Vedanta. So Shankara was the foremost exponent of Advaita, and he wrote commentaries on all these source texts. So you can see he has written on the Upanishads, he's written on Bhagavad Gita, he's written on Brahma Sutra, etc. So I'm done with my little introduction to Advaita Vedanta, and now